Hi, everybody. Good evening. I'm Martin Bandyke. I'm the music host, former morning drive host at Ann Arbor's 107.1. And as I've been telling everyone within earshot over the last several weeks, I just retired after about a 17-year stint doing the morning drive show on Ann Arbor's 107.1, which is a really cool rock station that I've had the great pleasure of working for a long time. I'm continuing my work at the station doing a Sunday show called Fine Tuning from 4 until 6, and I hope you can check that out. We've got an incredible new morning drive host by the name of Scott Vertical, who's got a long history in Detroit radio. So please, if you haven't listened to 107.1, it's a really cool station, great music, and really focused on the community, a lot of community oriented interviews. I think I passed out to most of you, but if you haven't gotten one on the table outside, we've got these spiffy Martin Bandyke 40th anniversary coffee mugs. February 21st is my 40-year anniversary as a music host here in Southeast Michigan. 17 years with 107.1 and then 23 with WDET-FM, the NPR station in Detroit. I've had the pleasure of hosting events at the Ann Arbor District Library for many years during the time that I've been the morning host on 107.1, and it just feels so good to be back here. It's been about 3 years since I've hosted an event at the library, and I thank all of our good friends, especially Emily Howard, for making this evening possible. I am a big book fan, a music fan, a movie fan, and I'm always interested in books about local history. And this recent title by our guest, James Thomas Mann, really caught my attention. James is a noted historian who has written several other books about happenings, historical happenings in Washtenaw County. His latest book he's going to present right now is called Murder Mayhem in Washtenaw County. James Thomas Mann, how are you? Good to see you.
Well.
Congratulations on this book. This is your 10th book?
10th published book.
How did this all get started? Where does this interest in history, specifically local history, come from?
Well, I tell people that my ancestry includes Irish, which means, well, some would say I'm full of blarney, but also there's a tradition of storytelling. And I am from a family of storytellers. And history provides a never-ending source of stories. There's also a cheap thrill in being able to point and say, that's where they found the body. And of course, murder is the ultimate crime, the ending of a person's life for gain, revenge, happenstance is the ultimate crime, because whatever that person could have been, for good or evil, they are deprived of that. They can never get that back. And that's also the warning for us, that we have to be careful with ourselves, with others, and we have to understand what's going on around us. People, their motivations. And that gives us a responsibility to set the better example.
Your other books have dealt with what aspects of local history? The subject matter this dark or what, James?
My 10 books include Down by the Deep, Our Heritage Down by the Depot, which is a informal history of the Depot Town area of Ypsilanti, which I did with Tom Dodd, who was a high school teacher here in Ann Arbor. And after we finished, we told everybody, every word is true, we made it up ourselves. I also vowed that I would never co-author another book and would certainly never work with another high school teacher.
Enough of that.
Yes, and they're in charge. I also did Ypsilanti, a history in pictures, a picture history of the city of Ypsilanti in the 1800s, Ypsilanti in the 20th century, and then my Wicked Washtenaw County, which deals with with crime, murder, mayhem, and some rather strange events. Also Wicked Ann Arbor and Wicked Ypsilanti. Again, a mix of subjects. And this book came about because the History Press does a murder and mayhem series.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
So I was interested in writing for them. And it was a sort of side project, taking my time with it. And I decided that it might be a good idea to finish it up about 5 years ago, when I'm sitting in my apartment, twiddling my thumbs, and I heard a smoke detector going off from upstairs. Then I heard the girl screaming. Then I heard her scream, "Help, fire." That got my attention.
I bet.
I ran up to the second floor, went to the front of the building, and this young woman is yelling into her phone, "Get the here, get the here." I left a word out. She was talking to somebody at the fire department. I looked in the door of her apartment. There were flames 3 feet high on a couch, one end of a couch to another. I heard a fireman say very calmly, "Get everyone out of the building." I thought that was a great idea.
Yeah.
I got out of the building, and it occurred after I had to find a new place to live. The building was declared uninhabitable.
Oh, man.
Then I'm going to need a little extra income. I contacted my editor at the History Press, who waxed and waned and sort of said that they really weren't interested in it. And so I got put back on the back shelf. And then last year, I got an email from him asking if I was still interested in doing it. Well, I had 10 chapters finished. I had to do 5 more. Got it done in the 6-month period on deadline. And that's how it came about. Agreed.
What was the first chapter that you wrote?
I don't really recall which chapter I wrote, but I mentioned I brought a proper here.
Yeah.
And being the local historian, I compare it to being in the secret police. We have a file.
Dossier, yes.
And when I was doing a book signing for Wicked Washtenaw County over at the Westgate Shopping Center, a woman came up to me after and handed me a file on the Kessler murder in Manchester, 1976. Old clippings that she had collected, and she handed them over to me, and she had known the victim, Peter Kessler. I put this in my files, held on to it, and I decided this would be a good subject to research for the book. And the old news section on the website for the Ann Arbor District Library was a wonderful source of information. And Peter Kessler was a 31-year-old attorney, lived outside of Manchester, had his office, his practice in Manchester. And in February of 1976, about 5 p.m., as the police reconstructed, he was in his home, saw a car, possibly a station wagon, come up the drive. He went out. Appears he may have known somebody in the car. There may have been 2 people. And the police theorized that somebody got out of the car. They exchanged words. The man then raised a pump-action shotgun. Kessler turned and ran toward his house. He had an alarm system installed. The man fired, missed the first shot, fired the second time, hit Kessler in the back left shoulder, spun him around, and then the man came up to him with the pump-action shotgun, fired once into Kessler's face, and then fired a second shot. Now, the woman who gave me the file told me that about a year before this, someone had fired a high-powered rifle into Kessler's house. And she had told him that he should be careful of hunters. He lived out in the country. And she said he told her he knew it was deliberate and he knew who did it and he would deal with it. There also had been a break-in sometime before, but nothing was stolen. It is still an unsolved murder.
Really? Oh.
About 6 years later, state police got a phone call from an anonymous source who said there are interesting things in the river. Well, the river has many secrets. And he specifically told them to go to Sharon Road, where it crosses the River Raisin. Diver went in, got all these items, apparently stolen from a auto body shop. And the diver went in for one last dive, probed the mud, and came up with a corroded shotgun, pump action. It was tested, but they couldn't determine if it could have been in the murder, but they couldn't determine it was not. So it appears to have been a personal grudge. And as I said, it's unsolved.
And you said he was an attorney.
He was an attorney, and his private life was much more complicated than his friends and family realized. He had one or two false identities which he used. Some of his business dealings were, the police labeled as questionable. And the police did narrow down the suspects to one person who had known him for a long time, but on the advice of legal counsel, chose not to talk with the police. And that is where the investigation stands.
Of all the crimes that you have in your book, how many other ones are unsolved? Are most of them solved or no?
Most of them are solved.
Okay.
There's something intriguing about an unsolved case.
Yeah, yeah.
But people like to know, how does the story end? And unsolved cases, they don't end.
Yeah, yeah. So your research takes you where? Takes you to the library? Takes you where do you find the materials that you use in your research?
A lot of it is in old newspapers.
Uh-huh.
And the older newspapers were wonderful for details. I forget which city it was, but the chief of police many years ago announced he would like to replace all of his detectives with news reporters because they would always pursue after every lead. And it's not so much now, but in many of these cases, I was able to almost follow the police investigation, detail by detail. Today, rightfully so, they are very closed-mouthed about what they are doing. Mm-hmm.
What's the earliest crime in your book? How old does that go back to?
Oh, offhand, I don't remember. About 1800s, start with the 1800s, and then come into the 20th century. There's the murder at the railroad depot in Ypsilanti.
One of the ones I wanted to specifically ask you about that was particularly intriguing. Give us an overview of this chapter and this crime.
Okay, it started in Detroit. January 9th, I think, 1910, 3 young men who had met in reform school got on the train in Detroit, came to Ypsilanti, got off, and then went to the interurban car barns, sort of a street railway system, like a trolley line that operated all through Michigan into the 1920s. And found out when the next car to Detroit was going to leave. They went down the street and decide to rob a jewelry store. They break in through a window in the back. One is stationed outside as the lookout. The other 2 are inside doing whatever it is they're doing. The night watchman, William Morey, comes down the street, turns the corner, goes into the alley, and became suspicious when he sees the lookout running down the alley the other way. Finds the panes have been removed, enters the building, has a brief shootout with the two men inside. One was hurt. And they disappear into the night. And later on, they're at the Michigan Central Railroad Station in Ypsilanti. The night manager, Henry Miner, had been told to be on the lookout for these guys. He and the ticket agent went into the ladies' restroom where they found two of these men and took them into custody. They're taking them into another room when one pulls out a gun and starts shooting. Miner was fatally wounded. And the other two run off. They were quickly captured. Miner is buried in Highland Cemetery. Robert McCormick, who was convicted of the murder, was originally from Ypsilanti. They may have been cousins, distantly related. And 2 years later, he died of tuberculosis in Jackson Prison. Prisoners took up a collection to give him a Christian burial, and he too is buried in Highland Cemetery. In fact, if you stand at his gravesite, you can see where Henry Miner is buried.
Take us into another chapter, another one I found particularly interesting, this bank robbery in Dexter.
Yes.
What year is this again?
What is it? It's in there somewhere.
1894.
1894, yes. You expect me to remember everything?
Yes.
One of the clerks shows up, goes inside, starts reading the newspaper. He finds the other clerk inside the bank vault, looking like he's been roughed up. There's an investigation because money has disappeared. The question is, who could have stolen it? Early in the morning, he said two men had come into the bank. He made him open the vault, hit him over the head, and left him unconscious on the floor. So there was suspicion, but this is on the main street of Dexter. There were people walking back and forth in front of the building at that time.
Sure, yeah.
It's a small community. Everybody knows everybody. Strangers stick out. Finally, a detective from Detroit was brought in, and he asked about this piece of furniture, and he was told it couldn't be moved. So he moved it, and there was the money. The first clerk, the son of the president of the bank, confessed, but no charges were brought against him. The theory put around was that he was very disappointed that his grandfather, who he was very close to, had left him out of his will. Mm-hmm.
I'm going to ask you about one more chapter, but I want you to mention one or two other chapters that you found just particularly fascinating to research and write about.
They all were fascinating to research because trying to put the story together, finding the information, and I tried to find information from different sources, and that was wonderful when Ann Arbor had 3 or 4 different newspapers at the same time.
Yeah, what did we have, like 50, 60, 70 years ago? Where were they specifically? What newspapers were there?
Oh, there was the Ann Arbor News,
right.
the Ann Arbor Tribune for a time. There was, Ann Arbor Courier. No, that's more recent. The Ann Arbor Sentinel.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. So I would try to get as many different versions of the story because each one had different details. And this helped me put together the narrative. As I said, I'm a storyteller. What's the story? How does the pieces fit together? What leads to what? Mm-hmm. And the James Richards case from the 1890s. A hermit, he could count to 3. And 3 men broke into his place at night, injured him fatally, and they And the next morning, his neighbor comes in and asks how he's doing. And he asked his neighbor if he could let out his chickens. And that was his first concern in the morning. He was a farmer.
Yeah, yeah.
And then he mentions that he had been robbed the night before. So there's going through all these newspapers to try and find the pieces that fit together. Although it's a murder mystery, and in some ways it's not a completely satisfactory ending, but then there's the satisfaction of knowing that in at least part of it, justice was done with his estate. Mm-hmm.
Are you the type of person that watches shows like Dateline or 48 Hours? Do you have that kind of interest
Well,
as well?
I stopped watching television long ago.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes. And now I watch too much YouTube. But,
Sure.
but I've always been interested in murder mysteries. Dashiell Hammett is a favorite of mine.
Oh.
Because, of course, he was a detective. So he gets the sense of what it's like to investigate far better than others. Mm-hmm.
What for those who don't know, you do the tours in Ypsilanti around Halloween, I understand. Is that right?
Yes, I did mention that, didn't I?
Yeah.
Yeah, that gentleman over there was on them. Yes, I do the Highland Cemetery lantern tours. And I have kerosene-based lanterns. And we go at night into Highland Cemetery, and I give a tour, and I talk about the historic people there. It's not a ghost tour.
Not a ghost tour.
No, there's very few ghosts in Highland. They say the place is dead. I also mentioned the tours, everybody remember, they want to be where it's lively. Every guy remembers that girl with the really cold hands at the dance, and every girl remembers that guy at the dance who was really stiff. And the rest of the jokes are just as bad.
I imagine. Yeah. Let's get back to your book and the closing chapter, The Christ of Christine Kurtz.
Christine Kurtz. I know a little bit more about her because an ex-boyfriend is someone I know, and he wrote about her. In fact, they were living together in Ypsilanti in the late 60s. And he wrote about how one evening they're walking down Emmett Street. Car pulls up beside them, and there's 3 men inside. And they ask if she'd like to be out with some real men. And Greg Fournier said, "She's with me." They threatened to beat him up. And Christy, Greg told me, had a mouth. And due to sensitivities, we will not repeat her response, but she was very self-expressive. The driver of the car hit the gas, and Greg said they were left in a cloud of dust and leaves. 45 minutes later, a car fitting that description with 3 men in it pulled up in front of McKinney Union and offered Joan Schell a ride to Ann Arbor. She was desperate to get to her boyfriend, and she had missed the last bus. And 2 days later, her body was found. She is believed to be the second victim of the co-ed killer. And Greg feels that the driver of the car was John Norman Collins.
Oh, dear.
Mm-hmm. And Greg, by the way, wrote the book Terror in Ypsilanti, which I think is the better of the books on that time. Mm-hmm. And I told Greg, I hope I got Christy right. But years later, she's in Webster Township on a horse farm. She raised Arabian horses, loved animals, had lived off of a family trust. And in 1990, about Thanksgiving, she was last seen alive and then seemed to disappear. And her friends were very concerned because she would always make arrangements for her animals when she was away. Police searched the the property. They brought in dogs. Didn't find any trace of her. And then, the day after Christmas, one of her friends was moving bales of hay and taking inventory so he could order more. And he looked and he saw a pair of boots that he had bought for Christy as a gift. And she had been under the haystacks for a month.
Oh, dear.
And she had been shot in the back. The police immediately suspected a man who had been carrying out burglaries in the area.
Oh.
And it was known to be active in the area. He was traced to his family in Alabama, where he had parked Christie's truck, had a property of Christie with her, and also items stolen, including guns, from burglaries. And he was fined, and there was a trial. He was sent to prison. There was then an appeal because the prosecution had withheld evidence that might have helped the defense. So the state Supreme Court ordered a new trial, and finally he took a plea deal. So he would be eligible for parole in 30 years, which would be about now. I don't see him here. Okay. So
We will get to questions from our audience, but first, I want you to share one more chapter from your book with us, if you would, James.
Yes. Oh, you have a favorite?
Yeah, well, I mentioned a few. I want you to choose
Oh,
one.
goodness. We talked about the ones I prepared. Well, there's one in the book called New York Officer Shot.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And New York police officer shot in Washtenaw County. He was just passing through on his way home from visiting relatives in Grand Rapids, on vacation. He's going down the road, and car pulls up and starts shooting at him. It was an attempted robbery. He was blinded by the shots. He then ended up in University Hospital. Police found evidence, fingerprints, linking to one of the men. He ended up in jail. His girlfriend then tried to arrange a jailbreak from the Washtenaw County jail. They escaped, went to Monroe, where they were taken into custody by police officers there. He murdered one of the police officers who tried to take him into custody. He then was convicted of the murder, sentenced to life in prison, and he was white Caucasian. His victim was white Caucasian. I mention that because a lynch mob then formed outside the jail, threatening to kill him.
Wow.
The state police formed a square around him and got him through the mob, got him into the car, and drove and got him to Jackson Prison. It seems, in my very little research in lynchings, that if the police made an effort to protect the suspect or the defendant or the accused, they were usually able to protect him. It was when they chose, maybe because of race or some other factor, that the mob would get their victim. And it may surprise people to realize that there were lynch mobs in Michigan. We had a few here, one in Ann Arbor. That's not in the book, but that's another project.
What time frame are we talking about?
We're talking early 30s. The New York officer shot was in 1930.
Okay.
And the next lynching here in Ann Arbor, also known as the Torch Murders, possibly my next book, I've got the text done, took place here in Ann Arbor, and the mob, something like 10,000 people, threatened to storm the county building
Oh my
at
God.
that time. And if you're familiar with Michigan history, the name Harry Bennett may sound familiar. Henry Ford's
Yes. Oh,
head of-
yeah, yeah, yeah.
head of his goon squad. He drove a car through the mob up to the steps of the courthouse. The three men accused, two white, one African American, were put in his car, and he drove them through the mob and delivered them to Jackson Prison.
So this is tantalizing. This is going to be your new book. You got to tell us more about this.
Okay, the Torch Murders, 1931. Actually started August 11th, 1931 at 5:45, when a farmer near the village of Willis saw a car burning. Inside were the bodies of 4 teenagers, 2 male, 2 female, all about 16 years old, burned almost beyond recognition. And because it was on the county line, the Washtenaw, Wayne County line, there was a question of jurisdiction. And so the Wayne County prosecutor, Henry Toy, was put in charge of the investigation, and they're running around because they have nothing to work with. And then Ralph Stoddard, the chief of police in the city of Ypsilanti, is meeting with the man who told him of his suspicions of a man named David, oh God, can't think of his name, of a man. Then a second man comes in and puts the murder weapon on his desk. The gun is rushed to Detroit, where the Detroit Police Department had a ballistics department, before the FBI, by the way. It matched the murder weapon, and so they picked up Blackstone, David Blackstone, questioned him. This was pre-Miranda rights. He implicated Fred Smith, and then Frank Oliver became implicated. And as I said, the bodies were found August 11th. That was Tuesday. Midnight Thursday, Harry Bennett delivers the 3 to Jackson Prison. One of the interesting aspects of this case is that while in prison, Frank Oliver turned his life around. He became an upright citizen, and his sentence was commuted from 4 consecutive life terms. He was allowed to go on parole, moved to Washington State as agreed, and while there, established a program to help prosecutors determine who should be eligible for parole.
Oh.
I think that if he had not gotten involved in this, he probably would have become a respectable citizen.
When's this new book going to come out?
As soon as I can get enough pictures for it,
Okay.
get a publisher interested, and get it out of the printer.
You think the History Press might be interested? Any
They
idea?
have right of first
Okay.
refusal.
Oh, okay.
And this is a story that needs pictures, and pictures with these books is a problem. That's because there are days when I feel like singing "Where Have All the Archives Gone?"
Oh.
Because it's difficult to find old pictures now. And although the old news section was a great help in researching this book and also the Torch Murder book, they do not have the copyright to images. And the Ann Arbor News, M.Live, doesn't have the old photographs. They have some, but not all. And then they charge $100 per picture for those that they have.
Wow, per picture. Wow.
Yeah, I got out my coin purse and counted the pennies, and that's why there's so few pictures in there. And now I find out that to license pictures, the parent company of the Detroit Free Press, they charge $275 per image. But I will get this done.
Good.
Okay, so.
Let's folks have some questions, please. We're going to get a microphone to you. Hang on just 1 second.
Uh-huh.
And we just want to use the mic here so people watching the recording or listening on the live stream can hear the question.
Thank you. Did I hear you mention Harry Bennett?
Yes, you did. And I didn't swear.
He lived on Getty's Road,
That is correct.
backing up to the Huron River with an escape tunnel to the river, I understand.
That's the story.
And he had a farmhouse across the road.
Mhm.
And he was known for
He was the Union Buster.
Yeah, the infamous, this is the
Yeah, special
River
service.
Rouge Bridge incident, correct?
The Battle of the Overpass.
Yeah, Battle of the Overpass, thank you.
And the Special Service Section that would spy on everybody in the Ford Motor Company. In fact, during the Second World War, the woman who was in charge of women workers, her car disappeared from the parking lot. The next day, it reappears. And as she's driving home, she had a friend who had been visiting that day, and she's complaining about how they said they lost the car, and then she finds it in the exact same place the next day, and her friend points to the side of the road. They park. They leave the car, and her friend says there's probably bugging devices, microphones in the car. Never found any, but that was the kind of thing they did.
About some other questions for James? Yeah, please, we'll get the microphone to you
Mhm.
in back.
So in reading your latest book, there was a section there that's very confusing.
Oh.
The Russells, and like the Russell McComas, who was like MCCOMIS, and then there was another with two M's, and I was wondering, were they cousins, brothers, or what was the case with that? That was the New York City one, or the
Oh,
one with the guy from New York who got shot?
okay, I don't remember that offhand. It's a good thing I never claimed to be perfect. And
I just thought it was so weird that these two criminals who met up
oh,
had names that were so similar.
yes, that. I don't know if they were related or not. Sounds like they were. There was the wife of one that tried to get one broken out of the Washtenaw County Jail. Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was just confusing because I'm like, their names aren't exactly the same, but they were just so weird. I mean, I guess it must have been like a weird coincidence or something.
Mhm. Yeah. Try writing a book like with that kind of information.
I understand. Thank you.
Thank you.
You spoke earlier, I forget which incident in your book, but you mentioned in passing that something that it was, the investigation was pre-FBI. When did the FBI come into being? And what were the circumstances around
The
that?
FBI, early 20th century, it was another name, and rather a corrupt department, and then J. Edgar Hoover took over, a man who, like Harry Bennett, knew how to publicize himself.
Hmm.
And he did a lot to straighten it out. In fact, well into the 1930s, FBI agents couldn't carry guns.
Couldn't.
They were not supposed to. Some did, unofficially. But he did build up that department. Unfortunately, in the later years, he let his political views run his decisions. But he did a lot of good for this country. Mhm.
In your research into these crimes, what as a armchair psychologist, what is the overriding motive for the majority of this? Is it money? Is it lust? Is it hatred? Is it all of the above? Like what are
Yes.
Yeah.
All of them seem to play a factor.
Yeah.
The bank robbery, money and perhaps anger at his grandfather for leaving him out of the will. The men who broke into James Richards' home were after money. The shooting of Kessler may have been something to do with a relationship. His brother said his private life was complicated.
Yeah.
And so there was anger in that one. So in all of these murders, there's a mix of motives.
A mix.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, so, there are many, many folks who, are unhappy, who don't have enough money, who, and the vast majority of folks don't commit dastardly crimes like this. What is the, excuse the, I guess pun intended, trigger for this? I mean, there may be impulses, but as humans, we decide. It's really, from watching more than a couple of Datelines and reading your books, you go, hey, don't do this. You're going to really mess your life up permanently. What is the trigger for folks who get into such terrible trouble like
That has been
this?
a subject of debate for centuries.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Some it's personality disorders. Well, one of the cases we didn't talk about, the McHenry shootings. She was schizophrenic and felt that the family was against her. And so she killed her mother and brother and then tried to kill another brother. This is one of the stories I point to as hopeful for human nature, because she shot her mother, 1937, shot her younger brother in the car,
Lord.
then tried to kill another brother at their home, then killed herself. And they're all buried together in Highland Cemetery. The family decided she didn't know what she was doing. And so the mother is here. The father, who died in 1960, is next to her. Ruth, the daughter, is there. And then the son, and the brother that she killed is there. They're all there. A wonderful and almost unbelievable act of forgiveness. So there's hope.
Yeah. Another type of crime that is also so hard to fathom are cases like the famous Leopold and Loeb case, and I'm not sure if this is ultimately what will be determined in the horrific multiple murder case in Idaho, where there doesn't seem to be a motive other than trying to do a perfect crime, quote unquote.
Leopold and Loeb, there's a great movie, Compulsion, based on it. They decided that they would do the perfect crime to prove how brilliant they were. They saw themselves.
No other reason than that.
Yes.
And they picked a random
Well, they was
person?
No, one of them was a cousin of one of them, and he was Bobby Franks. He was a young cousin of him. They picked him up, murdered him, and they thought that because they were genius levels IQs, one of them was the youngest graduate from the University of Michigan in its history.
Huh.
And they thought they could get away with the perfect crime. Well, they were a couple of dummies. I mean, it's not in the movie Compulsion, but they threw the item that they used to carry out the murder with into some bushes, right in front of somebody standing by the roadside, in full view. He took note of the license plate number.
Not too smart.
No. And anyone who commits a crime, I think, is not too smart.
Yeah.
As to the Idaho murders, I have for sometimes suspected that urge to do the perfect crime was part of it. And so he comes down the stairs, he's walking into the building. One of the other young women is standing in the doorway, sees him. And there's been a lot of debate about this, but you know, fight, flight, and she froze. And, 20-something woman, college student, she'd probably been drinking. She stands there. There's enough light for her to see him, but because I think this may have saved her life, is that because she froze, he may not have seen her, and he walked out the door. And of course, for fear and drinking and whatever, she went back, locked the door. And then the next morning, they're calling the police and saying somebody's unconscious. It's a lot of questions there that still need answers.
A lot.
Mhm.
Yeah.
We'll never, I think, get a really good answer as to the why for this. But it sounds, of course, we're only the prosecution's case, but it sounds like they've got a strong case against him. Mhm.
Any final questions for James before we sell some books, hopefully, and let him run for the night? Anything else?
Nope.
Anybody? Yeah. We appreciate you being here. The latest book on the History Press is Murder Mayhem in Washtenaw County with our very learned historian, James Thomas Mann. Appreciate you being with us. That we should have had this on around Halloween, not on Groundhog's Day for this subject matter. So thank you everyone for being here. Thanks to our friends as well at the Ann Arbor District Library. I'm going to be back 3 weeks from tonight with another book event with Bruce Harkness. He's got a sensational book that's receiving positive reviews called Photographs from Detroit, covering the years 1975 to 2019. And then I'm going to be out at the Michigan Theater doing a pre-Oscars event, again presented by the Ann Arbor District Library. That'll be on the evening of Wednesday, March the 8th. So we hope to see you then. Folks, thanks for coming. James, thanks for being here.
Thank
Have a
you
good
for
night,
being here,
everyone,
Jim.
okay?